Yeah, exactly. It's tricking the audience into it's luring them in with plot and giving them story instead, which is also something we talk a lot about is like plot versus story. Like plot is like the things that are happening and the story is like what it's actually about. And like the plot should be the thing that seems the most important at first and the story should be like in there but almost recognizable. And then as the movie goes on, like that ratio should completely reverse itself.
When I think of modern mainstream movies, spectacle is the word that often comes to mind. To me, a lot of mainstream movies are starting to feel preoccupied with insane action set pieces, an avalanche of CGI, globe-trotting environments, and a few twists along the way. It's gotten so complex in those regards, I feel like the important things like character and story are more often than not forgotten. I think back to one of my favorite movies ever made, 12 Angry Men, and how it achieves greatness in its simplicity. Its plot is fairly straightforward. Following a murder trial, 12 jurors must discuss whether or not the defendant is guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's it. That's the plot, more or less. Yet, the film uses a simplistic plot to its advantage, focusing more so on strong characters and themes which are held together by remarkable camera work and staging. Even the idea of one conversation stretching the entire hour-and-a-half runtime might seem long-winded, but the pacing is expertly crafted and engaging. The setting is perfect, whilst also quite simple. The entire film, minus 3 to 4 minutes, takes place in a jury room. After a while, the room becomes a character in of itself. There's not a lot of space in it to begin with, but it's made more crowded by the giant table in the middle. Characters are constantly on top of one another. It also doesn't help that it's the hottest day of the year and the air conditioning is broken. As the film goes on, you could see sweat stains start to form on the suits of each character. Considering that they can't leave until a decision is made, these people are literally trapped and put in the worst possible condition to make such an impactful decision. As an audience, it puts us in the character's shoes because we're stuck in the room with them. It's hard to determine specific scenes as time feels continuous. As the conversation brings in new developments and these characters go around in circles, the setting really bears down on you, just like it does them. You could relate to their frustration, being somewhere you don't necessarily want to be but have to. All the performances are phenomenal and suck you into the story even further. You never feel like you're watching people act. Each character is complex and has their moment to shine. Their life experiences and prejudices influence their decisions and characteristics, making them feel like real people. What makes for great drama is having all of these different personalities stuck in a room together, and we get to slowly build up to explosive confrontations and realizations. To start off, our protagonist, juror number 8, is a man with strong moral values. He's empathetic and respectable, even lending an open ear to those who berate him. It's his compassion for human life that kickstarts the film, as he's the only one who votes not guilty. He's the beacon for human decency and makes us understand the value of human life. This puts him at odds with the excitable juror number 3. He's the perfect foil for juror number 8, where juror number 8 is calm, collected, and mannered. Juror number 3 is aggressive, easily irritable, and shows a lack of respect for his fellow jurors. He has a vendetta against the youth as a reflection of how his father raised him, and expressed later on how he raised his son. This makes the case very personal for him as he desperately wants the kid to be guilty. By the end, he does what's right and you feel pity for him. He's not evil. He's just a product of the conventions associated with being a man at the time. Another advocate for guilty is juror number 4, who is mentioned to be a stockbroker. This highlights that juror number 4 is used to analyzing the little details, which makes him the voice of logic.
It's possible, but not very probable.
He's very similar to juror number 8. They both obsess over the little details presented in the case and both want to reach a logical verdict, but are doing it for different sides. Juror number 5 grew up in a slum. This makes him uncomfortable when the other jurors generalize those who live in slums as all bad. He's sympathetic towards the kid and doesn't consider his upbringing a notable reason for being guilty. I guess you could say he's similar to juror number 3 in the sense that the case becomes very personal for them, but where they differ is how they let it affect their overall decision making. Juror number 9 is also very respectable, and is a character we spend a lot of time with, but I feel we learn the least about him, or at the very least not outright. He has this monologue where he discusses one of the witnesses, an old man who he suspects unintentionally lied about his testimony in order to feel important once in his life. He explains that it's a sad thing to be close to death knowing that no one will carry out your legacy in any meaningful way, and that you are ultimately insignificant. He mentions he knows this type of man very well, and I've always suspected he's projecting how he feels about himself. It's really sad if that's the case, but it makes him more of an endearing character in my opinion. Juror number 7 is a big sports fan and has tickets for a ball game later that night. This means that he's in the most rush for a verdict to be met. He becomes more irritable as time goes on and makes decisions based on what will get him out of there quicker. Juror number 12 works in advertising, an industry that is reliant on the trends and fads of a given period in time. Thus, juror number 12 is consistently shown to be indecisive and mostly agreeing with points made by others. Next to him, juror number 1 is an assistant coach, which explains why he's so good at keeping order in a room full of angry men. Juror number 2 is a shy and awkward bank teller. He rarely speaks up against the majority, fearing that he'll bother them. He also isn't quick on his feet when responding to others, which leads to some funny moments.
Oh, come on. You're like everybody else. You think too much, you get mixed up. You know what I mean?
Now listen, I don't think you have any right to... Loudmouth.
Throughout the course of the film, he finds his voice, speaking up for what he believes is right, even providing a notable flaw in one of the testimonies. Juror number 11 is a foreigner, which could be the reason why he shows a great appreciation for democracy and the right for a moral and fair trial. He's constantly advocating to keep competition out of the decision process. He takes this process very seriously, keeping notes of everyone's thoughts and calling out the other jurors for treating a boy's life like a game. Now, if there's a juror that doesn't get a lot of screen time, it's juror number 6. We know nothing about him except that he's a working man, letting others do the supposing for him. He seems to be the most open-minded, wanting to hear what everyone has to say. He's quick to call out juror number 3, even going as far as to threaten him for being disrespectful towards juror number 9. The way he reassures juror number 9 that his voice is as important as everyone else's makes number 6 very likable in my book. Lastly, the least likable juror is juror number 10, who is slowly revealed to be a racist. He automatically believes the kid is guilty, slowly because he's a minority. One of the most powerful moments in the film is when he finally explodes into a racist tantrum, and all the men unanimously turn their backs to him, shunning him. For 1954, this was ahead of its time and feels profound even till this day. Taking all of these characters together, it's clear that the film highlights themes such as value in human life, justice, and sticking up for your beliefs no matter the odds stacked against you. You can analyze these characters for hours. I'm barely scratching the surface, so I'll leave you with one last reason why this film is so great at taking a simple concept and running with it. It's the direction. In the entire hour-and-a-half runtime, the room and characters never feel tedious. They're always shot in a dynamic way. Not only are the characters and dialogue telling a story, but the directing conveys a visual language as well. When one character is standing alone on one side of the room compared to the other 11 who disagree, you can truly feel how alone they truly are. The way the camera pans into a character's facial expression draws you into their emotions and tells you everything you need to know. The scene where juror number 8 has to pace around the room in order to prove his point is so visually engaging as the camera trucks with them. It's a moment that could be so easily boring, but isn't. Even something as simple as shooting these characters' vote is handled with such class. Close-ups with hands raising up into the shot become suspenseful, as you don't know who's voting until the camera pans down, revealing who it is. It really is just a marvel to watch. I feel like you could turn the sound off, watch the cinematography, and still learn something about great filmmaking here. What I take from 12 Angry Men is that there's no such thing as boring stories, only boring storytellers. It makes the most of its narrative restraints, focusing on the importance of character, theme, and camera work. It's a kind of film that makes you appreciate the art, and it blows me away every single time I watch it. Now, that begs the question, is 12 Angry Men one of the greatest movies ever made? I don't know, but it's possible. I would love to argue it, but I have a ball game to catch at 8.